A 4-year-old girl falls into a gorilla pit. 400 pounds of raw muscle walks straight toward her. The crowd screams. The zookeepers freeze. One man gives the order, "Take the shot." The gorilla lifts the child, cradles her, and lays her down unharmed. Then, just before the tranquilizer takes him, he turns his head and points at the man who pulled the trigger. Not random, not reflex. He pointed, and then he died. What happened next still haunts everyone who saw it. This wasn't just an animal, it was something more. At exactly 11:42:07 a.m., the zoo's overhead camera, Camera 6, records a moment so ordinary it goes unnoticed. A mother, mid-stride along the public viewing path of the gorilla enclosure, glances down at her phone. Her grip on her daughter's wrist loosens, not carelessly, just enough for a child to feel it. The little girl, 4 years old, doesn't yank away. She simply slides free, fluid, quiet, intentional. She moves to the railing in a heartbeat. No one stops her, no one sees. She climbs. One sneaker plants on the middle steel bar, her small fingers wrapping the top rail with the familiarity of a child who's climbed furniture before. For half a second she balances, knees bent, hair in her eyes. No fear, no hesitation. Then she leans forward. The tilt is subtle, like she's trying to get a better look. But the angle is wrong, too far. Her center of gravity crosses the invisible threshold, and her body drops. Fast. She falls 8 feet straight down into the enclosure. No scream, no flailing, just a sharp thud as her side hits the dirt-covered grass. Her head bounces once off the edge of a rock. A puff of dust kicks up. Her dress, a soft pink with white flowers, sticks out sharply against the green. One of her shoes lands 2 feet away, upside down. The crowd doesn't react immediately. There's a stunned pause, 0.8 seconds of collective paralysis. Then a woman screams, a man yells, "Oh my God!" Someone near the back starts crying. Phones go up like reflexes. The mother hasn't moved. She's still holding her phone. Her mouth is open, frozen. Inside the enclosure, in the dim space beneath the observation platform, something moves. A dark mass unfolds from shadow. Slow, heavy. Rocco, the zoo's 420-pound silverback male, emerges into view. 17 years old. Alpha. Respected. Watched. Documented. And, most importantly, unpredictable. He steps forward with full control. No chest beating, no vocalizing, no threat display. He just looks. His black eyes track the child like a laser. His arms hang low. Fingers flex once, then relax. He sniffs the air, turns his head slightly, left, then right, then fixes his gaze squarely on the crumpled child lying motionless at the base of the enclosure wall. The staff viewing deck erupts in radio chatter, but no one moves. The nearest tranquilizer team is 2 buildings away. The keepers on the deck aren't trained for entry. There's no barrier left, no net, no rappelling line. The moment belongs to the gorilla. And whatever he decides to do, the silence cracked at 11:43:51 a.m. Green light, fire. The order came through the radio like a cold slap. Mitch Graham's voice, flat, professional, unshaken, cut through the air on the keeper deck, shattering the fragile quiet that had settled over the crowd. Dana Brill turned her head sharply, eyes wide. She wasn't ready. None of them were. But the protocol was, and the tranquilizer team had been waiting. Bolt locked, scope set, pressure charged. A low hiss burst from the tree line behind the enclosure. The dart flew across 40 yards with surgical precision and buried itself into Rocco's right flank just below the shoulder blade. A clean shot, fast delivery, 3.5 cc of carfentanil, a dose calculated to drop a creature his size in 90 seconds. The impact made a muffled thuck. Rocco flinched hard, shoulders recoiling as the pain registered. His head whipped around. Not toward the source, not toward the trees. He didn't react like an animal under threat. No roaring, no lunging, no panic. Instead, he turned to the girl. She had begun to stir, barely. A soft whimper escaped her lips. Her arm moved across her stomach. She wasn't fully conscious, but something inside her recognized the change. Her body curled tighter in the grass. Rocco moved instantly. With a strength that belied his slowing pulse, he dragged his massive frame closer to her. His arms scooped around her gently, not gripping, cradling. One hand supported her back, the other under her legs. And then, in full view of 120 stunned spectators, 3 zookeepers, 2 handlers, and half a dozen security officers. Rocco picked her up, not violently, not clumsily, like a parent, like instinct. Like this was not the first time. People screamed. One woman fainted. Another dropped to her knees, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over. Dana slammed her walkie. "He's holding her! He's holding her!" The dart was working fast now. Rocco's eyelids drooped. His limbs began to tremble. He stumbled once but didn't fall. Instead, he turned, slowly, deliberately, toward the center of the enclosure. His legs buckled, his arms tightened, still gentle, still controlled. And then, halfway between the wall and the platform, with every eye on him and death creeping up his spine, Rocco stopped. He went down to one knee. Then he shifted, laying the child softly on the grass beside him. And just before his massive body began to tip, before gravity took over and his breath grew shallow, he turned his head. His eyes locked with one man, Mitch Graham. The handler stood at the far edge of the keeper deck, arms crossed, rifle at his side. He wasn't gloating, he wasn't proud, but his jaw was tight, his face cold. That's when it happened. With the dart fully in effect, Rocco's arm trembled, rose slightly, just a few inches, and pointed, directly at Mitch, not a wild gesture, not flailing, not fear, deliberate, accusing, final. And then Rocco collapsed. His body hit the ground with a dull, terrible weight. The girl lay beside him, her chest slowly rising, safe, untouched. No one spoke. And from that moment on, nothing in that zoo was ever seen the same way again. The body hit the earth like a fallen monument. Rocco's chest thudded into the soil, limbs folding awkwardly beneath his weight. Dust burst up around him. His head lolled to the side, eyes still open, still locked, still staring at Mitch Graham. And that arm, that massive, trembling arm. It hadn't dropped immediately. Witnesses would later swear it hung in the air a second longer than it should have. Extended, unmistakable, pointing directly toward the man on the deck. Not up, not random, not twitching. A straight, deliberate line, palm down, finger locked. As if he were naming something. As if in his final act, he demanded the crowd to look. It was too precise to ignore. Mitch didn't flinch, not visibly. But his jaw clenched so hard the tendons in his neck pulsed. His eyes didn't leave Rocco's, not when the arm fell, not when the weight of tranquilized muscle dragged it into the grass, not when the little girl coughed softly beside the gorilla's collapsed chest. He just stood there, still, blank, watching. Some thought he was in control. Others saw the truth. He was frozen. Dana Brill backed away slowly from the railing. She didn't say a word. Her walkie hung limp in her hand. All around her, the staff seemed to vibrate with nervous static. No one moved toward the enclosure. No one spoke to each other. A handler whispered, "Did you see that?" Another replied, "He pointed. He fucking pointed." Security didn't move. EMTs were still locked in place outside the gate, waiting for clearance. The crowd was silent, completely silent. Some still held up phones, but no one was recording anymore. A man lowered his camera and whispered to himself, "He knew. That thing knew." The girl was breathing. Light, rhythmic, safe. Her head rested against the grass, inches from Roko's chest. His arm had shielded her from the fall. There were bruises, a shallow cut, but no broken bones, no trauma. The gorilla hadn't hurt her, he'd protected her. The screens in the control room replayed the last 20 seconds on loop. The dart, the lift, the gaze, the point. Veterinarians blinked at the footage. Analysts tried to explain muscle spasms, nervous reaction, dying signal, but no one bought it. It didn't look like death, it looked like a choice. And for the first time in 16 years, Mitch Graham turned away from a scene before the protocol ended. He walked off the deck. Not a word, not a glance, just walked, with the gorilla's final gaze burning into the back of his skull. The zoo didn't go back to normal that day. Not that hour. Not that week. Maybe not ever. Once Roko collapsed, no one rushed in. There was no heroic scramble, no triumphant rescue. There was only hesitation. A paralyzing stillness that gripped every human in that space. Even with the child still lying inches from the gorilla's body, no one moved. 3 full minutes passed before the first responder crossed the threshold of the enclosure. And even then, he knelt down with shaking hands. The child was alive. She blinked at him. She tried to speak, but couldn't form words. He scooped her up gently, and only then, only when the innocent had been lifted free, did anyone exhale. But the silence didn't break. The keepers watched as Roko's body was loaded onto a reinforced stretcher under a black tarp. He was still warm. His hand had to be bent gently at the wrist. It had stiffened, still partially extended in that last gesture. The one that no one wanted to talk about, but no one could stop thinking about. Up in the keeper's control room, the footage was already on a secure loop. 6 angles, 3 audio channels. The shot, the lift, the stare, the point. One frame showed his eye locked on Mitch Graham at the precise second the arm rose. Analysts would try to explain it. Reflex, seizure, nerve reaction. But none of those things would explain the timing, the direction, the posture. None of those things would explain why Mitch had gone completely silent. After the incident, he filed no report, didn't give a statement, didn't speak to the press. He didn't show up for the post-protocol debriefing. The man who had written most of the zoo's response procedures, the one who had trained the Tranquilizer teams, mapped the shooting angles, chosen the carfentanil dose, simply disappeared. His resignation came in the form of a typed note left on Dana's desk 3 days later. "I followed policy, but I can't follow myself." Nothing more. No apology, no explanation, just absence. And in the days that followed, the staff stopped talking. Not out of shame, not out of legal pressure, out of something much deeper. They didn't know what they'd witnessed. They saw a creature act with grace under pain. They saw it protect, not destroy. They saw it resist instinct. And then, they saw it accuse. A primal, silent act that stripped every person in that room down to one feeling: guilt. And when guilt enters a place built on control, containment, and cages, silence follows. The security footage was never meant to leave internal review. 6 fixed-angle HD cameras captured everything from the moment the girl fell to the second Rocco's arm collapsed into the dirt. Audio synced. Multiple zoom levels. Thermal overlay. At first, the zoo's legal team locked it down. Internal investigators were instructed to scrub names, flag emotional language, extract frames for insurance. The narrative had to be clean. Child in danger, animal sedated, no injury. Protocol followed. But then someone leaked the footage. A 17-second clip, no editing, no commentary, just raw feed from camera 3, elevated, facing the enclosure at a diagonal. It showed the girl lying motionless, Rocco approaching, the gentle lift, the careful placement, and then the point. The camera zoomed as he raised his arm, slowly, shaking, his eyes tracking upward, past the glass barrier until they locked with the lens. His finger extended, and the internet exploded. The gorilla pointed at the guy who shot him. He knew. He fucking knew. This is not just an animal. That wasn't instinct. That was judgment. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Instagram Reels, reaction videos, analysis breakdowns, frame-by-frame enhancements. Psychologists weighed in. Animal behaviorists tried to de-escalate the claims. Some called it coincidence. Others called it conscience. #Rocco started trending. A mashup of the footage with a slowed-down Hans Zimmer score hit 5 million views in 2 days. People weren't just watching. They were arguing, grieving, turning. The zoo's public line was brittle. All actions taken were within ethical and safety protocols. We stand by the decisions of our trained personnel. This was a tragic but necessary outcome. But no one was listening, because the video told its own story, a clearer one. It didn't matter how many experts explained muscle spasms or tranquilizer tremors. It didn't matter how many graphs they drew about nerve misfires or post-shot shock responses. The public didn't care. They saw something they couldn't unsee, a creature capable of restraint, of care, of control, and in the end, of blame. A million voices echoed the same sentence under every post, every clip, every article. He pointed. He pointed. He pointed. No one remembered the handler's name, but everyone remembered who he was. And the man himself, Mitch Graham, watched the footage alone in his apartment, over and over, in silence, in darkness, pausing it at the same frame every time. Rocco's eyes, locked, focused, and that trembling finger, extended straight at him. Mitch Graham didn't last a week. 5 days after the incident, after the footage leak, after the zoo's PR damage control fell apart, Mitch vanished from the staff roster. No press conference, no farewell, just a resignation letter with no return address, typed in 12-point courier, and a key left on Dana Brill's desk in an unmarked envelope. He didn't clean out his locker, didn't reply to texts, didn't check his email. He didn't even attend the mandatory psychological debrief, an ironclad clause in his contract. Co-workers whispered that he'd been seen pacing the parking lot at 3 a.m., standing in front of the security monitors after hours, staring at the footage in reverse. One claimed he replayed it over 80 times in a single shift. Just the moment before the dart hit. The moment before Rocco turned. Before the point. By the time the zoo's director tried to reach him for official statements, he was gone. 2 weeks later, he was spotted outside a veterans center in Flagstaff, Arizona. Unshaven, sunburned, staring at nothing. A nurse asked if he needed help. He replied without turning his head. He looked right at me, not like an animal, like he understood exactly who I was. He didn't elaborate, didn't stay, just walked off. At night, the neighbors in the motel he'd checked into said they heard him yelling in his sleep. Always the same phrases. Don't shoot, he's not hurting her. I followed orders. Why did he look at me? He stopped eating, stopped shaving, spent his days either lying in bed with a towel covering the window or watching the clip frame by frame on an old laptop, flinching every time the finger rose. Mitch had handled Tranquilizer protocol for 12 years. He'd put down charging rhinos, sedated panicked tigers, once even stopped a chimpanzee mid-attack. He'd never missed a shot, but none of those animals had ever done what Rocco did. None of them had watched him die, and none of them had pointed. He told a friend, quietly, shakily, that it wasn't just the finger. It was what came before it. He made a choice. Not to run, not to fight, not to drop her. He had every right to rage, but he looked at me, and he chose to say something else. Mitch hasn't been seen since mid-June. The zoo doesn't mention him anymore. His name was removed from all training manuals, but those who were there, the ones who saw it live, still remember the way he looked on that deck. Rigid, pale, silent. Not like a man who saved a child. Like a man who'd just been convicted. And no court on earth could have delivered that sentence heavier than the eyes of a dying gorilla, and the hand that wouldn't stop shaking until it pointed. 6 years later, the girl returned. She was 10 now, quiet, serious, taller than her age. She wore a navy coat and scuffed sneakers. Her mother held her hand tighter than she used to. Even now, even after therapy, even after the nightmares had stopped. But the girl didn't resist. She just walked beside her, calm, eyes forward, gaze fixed on the exhibit that changed everything. The enclosure was different now. The railing had been raised, motion sensors installed, warning signs posted in 6 languages. But the troop was gone. No gorillas lived there anymore. The habitat stood silent, overgrown with ivy and moss, untouched, like a ruin no one dared to rebuild. At its center, mounted on a dark stone plinth, stood a single bronze plaque. No corporate logos, no sponsors, just an engraving. In memory of Rocco, guardian of the silent. He did not speak. He did not need to. Visitors passed it without slowing. Some took selfies. Some ignored it. But the girl didn't. She stood in front of it, staring at the words, at the empty space behind the glass, at the spot on the grass where his body had fallen, where her own blood had once soaked the dirt beside his. Her eyes didn't blink. Her jaw tightened, then quietly she asked the question. Not to her mother, not to the plaque, to no one and everyone. Did he die to protect me, or because of me? The words didn't echo, but they landed, like weight dropped onto soft ground. Her mother didn't answer. She couldn't. Behind them, a couple paused, overhearing. They didn't speak either, because it wasn't just a question, it was a verdict, for everyone who had stood on that deck, for everyone who said, follow orders, for everyone who watched and hesitated and still pulled the trigger. No article had ever asked that question. No press release had acknowledged it. But this girl, small and human and whole, was the only one who had the right to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent, like something holy had been said, something unfixable. And in that stillness, standing in the very spot where an animal once made a choice no human could explain, she became the final witness. Not to what happened, but to what it meant. 6 years later, the girl returned. She was 10 now, quiet, serious, taller than her age. She wore a navy coat and scuffed sneakers. Her mother held her hand tighter than she used to, even now, even after therapy, even after the nightmares had stopped. But the girl didn't resist. She just walked beside her, calm, eyes forward, gaze fixed on the exhibit that changed everything. The enclosure was different now. The railing had been raised, motion sensors installed, warning signs posted in 6 languages. But the troop was gone. No gorillas lived there anymore. The habitat stood silent, overgrown with ivy and moss, untouched, like a ruin no one dared to rebuild. At its center, mounted on a dark stone plinth, stood a single bronze plaque. No corporate logos, no sponsors, just an engraving. In memory of Rocco, guardian of the silent. He did not speak. He did not need to. Visitors passed it without slowing. Some took selfies, some ignored it. But the girl didn't. She stood in front of it, staring at the words, at the empty space behind the glass, at the spot on the grass where his body had fallen, where her own blood had once soaked the dirt beside his. Her eyes didn't blink. Her jaw tightened. Then, quietly, she asked the question. Not to her mother, not to the plaque, to no one and everyone. Did he die to protect me? Or because of me? The words didn't echo, but they landed, like weight dropped onto soft ground. Her mother didn't answer. She couldn't. Behind them, a couple paused, overhearing. They didn't speak either. Because it wasn't just a question. It was a verdict. For everyone who had stood on that deck, for everyone who said, "Follow orders," for everyone who watched and hesitated and still pulled the trigger. No article had ever asked that question. No press release had acknowledged it. But this girl, small and human and whole, was the only one who had the right to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent. Like something holy had been said, something unfixable. And in that stillness, standing in the very spot where an animal once made a choice no human could explain, she became the final witness, not to what happened, but to what it meant.